Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Michael Spencer. We are honoured to acknowledge Brigadier Hong, Chief Judge of the High Military Court of South Korea, Mr. Stephen Pearson, Chief Information Officer, Australian Department of Defence, and the accompanying delegation. We warmly welcome reunion members of the 7 RAAF Radio Apprentice Course of 1953. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of Henry Kendall High School, Gosford, New South Wales. If able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
tribute to Flight Sergeant Alexander Harold Weston, born in the Melbourne suburb of Collingwood on the 8th of July 1922. Alexander Harold Weston was the son of Evan and Laura Weston. Weston was living in the Melbourne suburb of Parkville and was employed as a purchasing clerk before he enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force in September 1942. The Weston family had a strong history of military service. Alex's father, Evan Weston, had served in the 8th Light Horse Regiment during the First World War. Alex's two brothers, Arthur and Morris, also served in the Royal Australian Air Force during the Second World War. After enlisting, Weston began training as an air gunner at No. 1 Initial Training School at Somers, near Melbourne, and then at No. 1 Wireless Air Gunners School at Ballarat. Weston then embarked for overseas service. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners, and engineers who, throughout the course of the war, joined Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. Weston's journey to Britain took him first to Canada, where he spent several months training before continuing his journey to Britain. After arriving in Britain, Weston undertook further specialist training before joining No. 12 Squadron, Royal Air Force. As part of the Royal Air Force's Bomber Command, No. 12 Squadron was equipped with a 4-engine Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. The crew that Weston joined in No. 12 Squadron had been with the squadron for less than a week when its Lancaster was shot down. On the night of the 3rd to the 4th of March 1945, the Lancaster in which Weston was the tail gunner was undertaking a training flight over England when it was shot down by an enemy intruder near Stockwith, Lincolnshire. Weston and all 6 of his fellow crewmates were killed. They were fellow Australians Flight Sergeant Ronald Horseman, Flight Sergeant Walter Pridmore, Flight Sergeant George Davis, Flight Sergeant Alan Cryer, and British crewmates Pilot Officer Arthur Thomas and Flight Sergeant Thomas McCaffrey. Alexander Weston was just 22 years old. The bodies of the crew were recovered from the crash, and Weston and his Australian crewmates were buried side by side in the Royal Air Force plot at Cambridge City Cemetery. Weston's name is listed here on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Alexander Harold Weston, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a good evening. Thank you.